So time lapses are really cool. They kind of give you this extra little detail in your videos. And there are two, ways you can go for a time lapse. You can go, the video route where, your camera spits out a video file at the end, or, you just take pictures of the whole thing and compile them together. Obviously, I go with the photo route because, I'm, a photographer, and you just get so much more details with your images compared to a video file. But so far, I've done 4 time lapses of taking pictures, and, so far they're okay. The main problem with my time lapses has been the editing. It's just, always taken me forever to do that. And then there's always some flickering in them. And kind of the reason there's flickering is because, I usually shoot manual for the time lapses because, I always shoot manual for everything. And I just thought, well, it could apply for the time lapses, but kind of been realizing it's not the best thing to shoot manual for the time lapses, but, kind of get into that later. But, flickering is, I kind of have my sequence, which is a, sunset, which is what I've been doing. So you have your pictures, they're going down, they're getting darker as they pass along. But then when you change a setting on your camera, say like ISO, because that's usually what I was changing. So I, raise the ISO because it's getting darker. But then you get, the image here from the previous ISO to the new one. It's going to be a change. So this one's darker, and then you get the little flash. And then this one's, obviously lighter because of the ISO raise. And then, as you keep going down, they're getting darker again, but then you change the ISO again, so it flicks again, and then those images are lighter than the previous set, and then, it just kind of keeps happening and happening, and, when you're watching a time lapses, seeing like that flicker of light keep happening is just very distracting. But I've been doing a lot of research, and I think I figured out a way to fix all my problems, and it's a pretty simple one. It's just to shoot in aperture priority. So we're gonna go, test it out and go shoot a time lapse. Alright, so we are now at a, nice downtown area, kind of near the ocean as well. So there's a lot of boats and stuff here, and kind of a nice shot of a bridge as well that hopefully we will be able to get in our time lapse. We just have to now find the perfect location. The sun is obviously setting over there, so we're not going to get it, but just got to find the right spot to get the best possible shot. Alright, so I think we're going to go with this area. This should look nice when the sun, starts to set and the lights come on the boats. And there are also a, crazy amount of birds here. And I really hope today is the day that I keep up my streak of not being shit on by a bird. Alright, so we now have the camera set up on the tripod. We are going with a Manfrotto tripod. This is part of their Be Free series. It's very nice and steady. Definitely a step up from that $50 Amazon tripod I was using. But kind of the main reason I got this one is because this part here can easily just do this. You can use some top-down shots. So, the main reason I got this was to be able to now do top-down shots. So it's definitely, pretty expensive because of that. And then also up here we have an L bracket, just so I could quickly release the camera if I need to. And then the camera itself is a Nikon D7500. Just with a 24-70 lens up front. And then for the settings on the camera here, we are shooting in aperture priority, which is the A. Don't really shoot in this because I usually just shoot all in manual. But for time lapses, I'm going to try shooting aperture priority. So because of that, we set my f-stop at f5.6, and then ISO is 100, and shutter speed right now is 1/1600 of a second. Obviously, that's going to go down later as it starts to get darker. I'll probably also raise the ISO as well, but for now, these are the starting off settings. And then as you can also see, the sun is going to be setting behind us, so, we won't get that sunset in the actual shot, but, I think this is still going to turn out pretty good. We do also have my intervalometer here set up. We're shooting at 6 frames a second, and that's just basically going to go on until I stop it, and it's just, plugged in right into the camera there. And then it is also 3:43, and then if you can see this, I don't know if you can see it very well, I'm using the Photo Pills app. Hold on. And then we're also using the Photo Pills app to track the sun, and don't mind my very fingerprinted screen. So it says the sun won't go down until 5:42, so we do have some time until the sun actually starts to set, and it doesn't say it will get dark until like 7, so that's pretty far away from now. Don't know if we're going to stay that whole time, probably just have to play it by ear. Alright, so it's now 3:50, it's still pretty light out, but we're just going to start this now. So as you can see, it is counting down, and then it is taking a picture on my camera here. We're also set to a manual focus, just so the focus stays the same throughout the whole time lapse, and that doesn't, get messed up. I don't know if you can tell, you probably can't tell very well from here, but there's a person right there, and that's like the one thing I hate about time lapses, is people somehow always find a way to get in my fucking shot. Alright, so it's been an hour now. The sun's about to go down behind this mountain pretty soon. We are now also a little bit over 600 pictures, and my shutter speed has now gone down to 1/800 of a second. So things are, working out the way we want them to. I do also think it's interesting because I've been seeing a lot of people, coming and going onto these boats, because, they probably live here, and, that's just something that I could never do because I am deeply afraid of the water and, things that live in it, like sharks, and just, drowning as well. And then also, I'd probably get, super seasick and throw up a bunch, which just doesn't sound fun at all. The sun is also just about to go behind the mountain, so things are gonna, start getting dark pretty quick here. Shit is also on fire, so who knew getting a time lapse could be this interesting. I am done with my time lapse, and as you can see, it is pitch black outside now, and I'm just walking back to my car right now a little bit quickly because this is definitely a creepy place to be at nighttime. Alright, so that was my time lapse as you saw, and this is probably my best time lapse in terms of technical settings. I'm not talking about, the scene at all, because I did do a sunrise in Yosemite, and, a bridge has nothing over a beautiful landscape you can get in Yosemite, but shooting in aperture priority definitely, worked out, and basically what aperture priority is, if you do not know, it is an automatic camera setting on your camera. And what it does is the aperture and the ISO are fixed, so those do not change at all. And the only thing that is changing is your shutter speed. It's either going up or down, depending on what it sees best to get that perfect exposure. And what an automatic, setting sees as a perfect exposure is, this is going to be really technical here. So you have, your histogram at the far end here. You have your shadows on the left side, and then going through, you have your midtones, and then on the right, you have your highlights, and kind of in that last quadrant of your highlights, you just want to make sure, you do have detail in there. That's kind of like a best exposure. And that's kind of what, the camera automatically sees as the perfect exposure. So it makes sure it has that, perfect amount of detail in the highlights just at that end there. And then basically, since I was shooting, automatic the whole way, every single image I took had that same exposure, which was the camera saw as the perfect exposure. So the whole time lapse, all those exposures were basically exactly the same. And so when I was editing the time lapse, I didn't have to change anything until I got, it was like completely pitch black, because the whole way, just saw that same exposure. So I didn't have to change anything at all, which was very nice. And that was why this was my best time lapse in the technical sense. And then at the end, I did switch it back to manual to get that night sky, because the way aperture priority works, the darker it gets, the lower your shutter speed would be getting. But the lower your shutter speed goes, it's still getting that little bit of detail in that last quadrant, which is where your highlights are. So, it would be nighttime outside, but then the picture your camera is capturing, it would still, look like it was, like before sunset, because it just needs to get that detail in that last quadrant of your histogram. And when it is nighttime, you're just, no matter what time, no matter what settings you're using, you're just not going to get details in that last quadrant of your histogram, because there's just not enough light to do that at nighttime. Unless you are, maybe shooting like a bright fucking light just with night all around it, then you would. But typically for nighttime images, you're not going to get what the camera sees as a perfect exposure. So if you don't take it off of aperture priority, your time lapse is just gonna, get darker, darker, and then it's just gonna stay this same, color range throughout the rest of it, and you're not gonna get nighttime at all. So if you do shoot aperture priority at the end, if you are doing a sunset, just switch it over to manual, so then that way you can get, that complete pitch black of night in your time lapse. Alright, so this whole experiment was a success, and I can now take higher quality time lapses at a faster and more efficient rate compared to what I was previously doing, which just was not working at all. But that's kind of a learning curve when you try anything new. And hopefully, when I get to travel again, I'll be able to put my new time lapse knowledge to use.